Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My special guest today is noted poet Christian J. Collier. His new book of poetry, The Gleaming of the Blade, is available now. Hello, Christian.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you're here because when I saw the cover of the book, read about the book, I was so excited.
That's excellent. You know, I felt that way when I saw the cover of the book. It's nice that
I'm sure you did, because I'm going to ask you, tell me about the cover, but I'll ask you those questions later. What I want to know first is, what is poetry to you?
Okay, the hard questions first. And there's a poet, Solmaz Sharif, who recently did an interview, and to paraphrase her answers, that I think poetry's job is to remind us that we're going to die, but we're not dead yet. And I love that. But to kind of offer something, you know, relatively original, I think, you know, just breaking it down, poetry is using language to interrogate and explore the human condition, you know, which is predominantly exploring themes of love, death, and desire.
Wow. It's very nice. Very nice. Why do you believe it's important? What makes it important? What makes poetry important?
I think that any forum that allows for truth-telling and space to question and investigate who we are, why we're here, and what has been done to us, for example, are all essential. Mm-hmm. You know, people have been abused and killed over poems. People have been exiled from their homes over poems. I remember Amiri Baraka, you know, receiving a lot of public scorn over his poem "Somebody Blow Up America" after 9/11. So the fact that in this century, you know, a poem could draw that much ire shows how strong and effective poems are.
Wow, it's very nice. I like that. They are effective, and they are strong, and they are powerful. Now, let's talk about your book. I want to hear about your book, The Gleaming of the Blade. Tell me about the title.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of multiple meanings, and last year I had the opportunity to teach a workshop, and one of the things that we talked about was duende. You know, basically that we all carry a shadow self, and once we kind of get into the murk of it, more interesting things tend to happen. You know, I think about Miss Hill's song "The X Factor." You know, once the first refrain is, you know, nobody loves you more than me, and no one ever will. But then later in the song we get nobody's hurt me more than you, nobody ever will. You know what I mean? So we get both sides of the coin, and that's what makes the song so impactful. But there's an excellent quote from Jen's Wiki talking about duende in music, and to again paraphrase, one of the things that Wiki says is by embracing duende, that shows us the gleaming of the knife, you know, so to speak. And I love that, and I was thinking about that, and then also I was thinking about wolf traps, which is, you know, the old adage that if you bury the handle of a knife in snow and ice, wolves will come, and they're kind of attracted to the gleaming of it, and they will essentially look at it, and then they start noticing blood's coming. So they're like, there's something great at the end of this, and eventually, by the time they realize that something's wrong, it's too late. They're going to either bleed out, or once they return to the pack, the wolves who are blood hungry, you know, they pounce. And I thought that was such an apt way of kind of thinking about the Black experience in America. You know, we have consistently been promised better, equality and better, and then and quickly, time and time again, had those things stripped away, and have been treated to brutality. And it's been great theater for the world to see.
Yes.
Black trauma is always entertainment for other people. So I thought about those two things, and after reworking the poems in it, I was like, I think that this title nails it. The original title was POV, for the point of view shot in film, and
yes,
I think the poems still have that lens, but I just think that having that title just perfectly puts you in the seat to kind of experience what happens throughout it.
So in terms of your inspiration to write the book, tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure, absolutely.
What inspired you?
2015, really. That was the year of Michael Brown and so many other things. And kind of coinciding with that is I received a grant from the Loft literary organization. And one of the things that I wanted to do was really interrogate race. So I was interviewing people, just hearing different stories about, racism and where they're at on different sides of the spectrum. And then over time, I just started, interrogating my own experience, my own life, and I started writing poems that kind of spoke to that. And there's been a lot of revision that's taken place over the years since then. But that really kind of informed the book because, and obviously we're in a moment now where, there's critical race theory is at the top of, certain people's agendas, even though that doesn't accurately speak to what critical race theory is, that they constantly incorrectly define it, and that's by design. But, I digress. But once you mention race, people's ears kind of perk up and people start to feel really tense, usually about it. But if you actually wade into it, you see a lot of different things, and there are a lot of colors, no pun intended, that you don't get exposed to if you just automatically shut down once somebody starts talking about race. Yes. So I thought it would be an interesting theme to try to work at and turn around and interrogate. I live in the South, and I always have, and that obviously has given me a very intimate relationship to race and racism. Like I can go 30 seconds down the street and see a rebel flag,
Yes.
But also in contemporary America, we still carry the ghosts of racism. So I think that it's really fascinating to, just to kind of walk around in that space and see it for what it is and what it's been.
Well, without further ado, Christian J. Collier, please share a poem.
All right. And this is the first time I'm actually reading from the physical book. So you guys get the first kickoff of it.
All right.
So this is called Benediction for the Black and Young. Children, we occupy a world not made to carry any one of us. Find the slivers of calm in the ash-filled air. Breathe. Do you feel the atoms coming apart around the garlic-white brims of our halos? We are living through the time that took touch from us, wading through the stubble of the burning night, finessing our feet forward as best we can. Let us pray there is a just God at the end of all of this. Let us pray he sees the columns of our dead on the sour buds of the street, then stirs and says, enough. Let us pray the liquor that drags us from the bed of one day and into the next does not run out. Pray the Hennessy and Crown stays put. Pray we can also do the same, sane and intact. Let us lay down our blues and not cross the threshold of another morning, howling for those we cannot see buried. Let us pray for the favor of the big sky, for burgundy wings no longer tucked beneath our shoulders and a sheath below the twitch of the stars. Let us bow our heads and dream a life that loves us better. May it be gold-hued. May our minds sculpt a love supreme that also holds our newborn ghosts. Let us whisper, because history says whenever someone black wonders aloud about the future, it instantly becomes a bruised sea of days they will never know. Children, if we are only meant to forfeit all that has ever known our names, let us fraternize with the conduit come to escort us away. Let the stomp of our forelimbs be the last bit of grace we grant this earth. Then let us rest well.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. That's
incredible. That's the first one. All right. Incredible, my friend. Let us pray. What does it mean to you to be a black male poet in the field of poetry today? What does that mean to you? Or just to be a poet in the field? What does it mean?
Well, I think that, you know, for me to be not just a poet, but a black poet, a black American poet, it means to me that, you know, I'm here because of the sacrifice and the excellent work from those who come before me. And I take that as a tremendous challenge to try to do the same. You know, I want to, you know, kind of keep the song going, and I want to do my due diligence to make excellent work. And I also want to take what I've learned from these people and instill it in other people that I come into contact with. You know, I am here because of the grace that other poets have offered me too, and I think that's so vital. You know, and I think that for anybody who's you know, who finds themselves in a certain tradition and a certain craft, I think that lineage is always important. So I want to continue the lineage. You know.
All right, very nice. What was an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
An early experience. Well, I will say I'm going to go in an interesting direction. So about when I was in my junior year of high school is when Deaf Poetry premiered on HBO, right? So, I remember.
Oh, that was the show.
It was a big thing. You know, I would, no matter what was going on Friday nights, it's like, I got to get home. I got to get home and I got to watch it. So, but I remember a couple years later, like I was in college. I'm in college in Tampa, Florida, and Shihan, who had been on Deaf Poetry, was on like a Pepsi commercial, and I was like, this is really kind of, I can't recall like the last time I've seen a poet on a commercial with like an international brand. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know if I have seen it since, but I've seen it sparingly. Jay Ivey did like an AARP commercial within the past few years, but it's extraordinarily rare. So that taught me that, you know, I mean, obviously from a marketing, you could glean that, you know, Pepsi was just like, oh, well, this is kind of like the hot thing right now. This appeals to an urban market. Sure. However, more than one thing can be true. And they're not going to put Shihan on the commercial if, you know, Shihan is just saying like crazy things, right? So there has to be some sort of value attached to what he's actually saying, even though this thing is essentially to try to get people to buy Pepsi. But I remember just thinking that you know, that small thing unlocks so much potential for other people who are practitioners of the craft.
Yes.
And I think that if you're dealing in poetry, you know, we're constantly dealing with ceilings. There's always like, oh, well, poetry doesn't make any money. Nobody reads poetry. And there's this. However, you get these little slivers from time to time, you know, Amanda Gorman, you know, being offered like $1.5 billion for a thing. So, and these are poets. Rupi Kaur, regardless of whatever people feel about, you know, the quality of her work, is a best-selling author, a poet. So these things have power, but I think they also show you what else is possible. It might not be possible for everybody, but nothing really is. But yeah, that was a really distinct. It had you not asked the question, I probably never would have thought about that again in my life. but it obviously it left an indelible mark, and I think that I have to believe that in the digital age, there's probably going to be more of that. I think that the Amanda Gorman effect is probably going to open some more doors, and just in terms of people allowing space for poets to walk through.
You mentioned the word, and I think you mentioned the word feelings, that there are feelings in poetry. I could be I'm paraphrasing, of course. Do you think that someone can be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Because, there are different styles and there are different schools and forms and everything of poems, like if a poet is a language poet and they're not necessarily trying to get at, narrative or moving your heart, or even something that, just kind of connects in a linear fashion, that's totally workable. But for me personally, and I think that the poems that really kind of connect across the board are poems that do have some modicum of emotion,
Yes.
Yes. I shouldn't say that. If there doesn't have to be anything, but I think that more often than not, some poem that gets at, again, like the human condition, something that we all can feel. I think that those tend to be the poems that kind of last longer.
Well, please share another poem.
Okay. So because we're doing radio, this poem is called The Quiet Storm. And for those who aren't familiar, the Quiet Storm was kind of like 10 p.m. in the evening, urban radio stations, black radio stations would start playing like R&B kind of, baby making music. And it was called the Quiet Storm. So I wanted to use that name just to kind of pay homage to the tradition, even though it goes somewhere else, So this is The Quiet Storm. The officer's gun still awakens me. 15 years after the night, his index finger became a cedar ring around the trigger. Anytime I close my eyes, the muzzle's round cavity is trained on me. Anytime rest takes hold, my mind expects the bullet, the sharp burst of light and noise. Because it does not come, I live within a wound no one else can see. Trauma built its monsters from the bones of experience. Blood records and remembers everything it survives. What did not kill me, I now belong to. What has allowed more time to pass through me, I am possessed by. What owns me, an ebony Glock 22 and a man's featureless face shouting behind a brass badge. My almost murderers breathe inside me. I hear grit rustling in their throats at all times. Some songs never sleep. Some songs never sleep. I hear grit rustling in their throats at all times inside me. My almost murderers breathe behind a brass badge, an ebony Glock 22, and a man's featureless face shouting, I am possessed by, owns me, I now belong to. What has allowed more time to pass through me, what did not kill me, records and remembers everything it survives. From the bones of experience, blood built its monsters within a wound no one else can see. Trauma. I live because it does not come. Anytime rest takes hold, my mind expects the bullet, the sharp burst of light and noise. Anytime I close my eyes, the muzzle's round cavity is trained on me. The index finger became a cedar ring around the trigger. 15 years after the night, the officer's gun still awakens me. Thank you.
Wow. What do I say now to an experience like that? What do I say, Christian J. Collier? What do I say?
Whatever you would like.
Has a poem ever humbled or frightened you?
A poem that I've written, or a poem
yes, a poem that you've written.
Oh, for sure. No, absolutely.
Tell me more.
there are poems. I mean, there are poems in this collection that, I'm like, I don't really know, But a good friend of mine, Donna Sprout Metz, who's also a poet, she took a workshop with Patricia Smith a couple years ago, and afterwards she was like, Patricia says that she has like these rules for her poems, and I was like, man, that's really kind of interesting. Like, what kind of rules would I give myself, And I actually revised the poem. I revised the poems in the collection based on a certain set of rules, and one of the rules was to allow myself to be dangerous. Say what I need or want to say, or more importantly, say what the poem needs and wants to say. Because I'm following the poem, and I'm following that thing to get at some truths, and some of my experiences are in that. But there's a poem, like just off the top of my head, there's a poem in it about a woman I used to work with who could never pronounce my name, and she wouldn't just not pronounce my name; she would just call me by like a totally different name. So there's like the opening of that one. I'm just like, it's because the poems also like don't come to play. Like these aren't necessarily like trying to, you're not going to get a bouquet of flowers and probably want to read these things to somebody that you kind of creep off. But just the opening of that, and it's purely from like and whoever's on the other end of the poem, it's that kind of thing. Like, I don't want them to get the wrong.
Okay. But, well, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back. Back. I am Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with Christian J. Collier. Your name rolls off the tongue, my friend. I think it's great. I really do.
I'll have to tell my parents.
Do that. All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
Oh, man, I have so many. Just off the top of my head, I love Jericho Brown. I feel like a Pulitzer Prize winning Jericho Brown. I love the way that Jericho works with the line, but also the way that Jericho works with music and rhythm. I think that's really fantastic. I've always loved Sharon Olds and Ann Sexton. I like what they do with voice, and they pull no punches. They give it to you honest and straight. And that's definitely something that I've aspired to do in my work. I like Matthew Rasmussen. He has a book called Black Aperture that came out, I think, back in 2013, and the whole thing is just fantastic. And I think that the way that he interrogates one central event, like the book largely is about his brother's suicide, but he turns it around from so many different angles that you get to experience, you know, the way that it affects the family, the way that it affects this person. And I think that that's amazing. And that's, you know, I'm a Scorpio, and we are known for our prowess as detectives. So anything that allows for, you know, analysis and interrogation, you know, I love, and that's something that I always strive for in my work, you know.
Well, you've mentioned the word interrogation more than once, and I plan to ask you the question, what are some of the predominant themes of your work? I want to know.
Oh, sure. I think I'm always interested, and I'm going to use it again, I'm always interested in interrogating a different and obviously in this collection, you know, it's I'm interrogating race, but also, you know, the region and also the country. And that's kind of where that turning it around kind of comes from, right? We get at those different things. In my full-length manuscript that, you know, I'm sending out again now, I'm interrogating what is a ghost? You know, who is a ghost? All of us are ghosts to somebody, and we all carry our own ghosts into the rooms that we enter. To kind of succinctly, you know, wrap it up, I would say that my work is interested in exploring the subject in a way that both utilizes the body and ventures to explore the world beyond it.
Wow, I like that. Please share another poem.
Absolutely. This is a John Coltrane poem. This is called When the Moon Couldn't Be Found. When the moon couldn't be found, John Coltrane seized my ear with the sound of his horn as my girlfriend's father followed me out of Graysville after he threatened to blow my head apart if he caught my brown hand upon her again. The fog silhouette shook its head while I barreled through its shame. It was witnessing again a black man stalked on a dark strand of Southern Road. At 3:37 in the morning, I was a blue locomotive, rage blue from one white town to another under a moonless sky. Coltrane was playing, and I wanted nothing but to be the rush of notes surging from the speakers, painting the shaded inside of my Dodge Intrepid. I wanted to be that free, that anointed by the sweet mouth of a dead god. Thank you.
Wow. Some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature, Christian. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it. While others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on it?
I all of that is accurate to a certain degree, and obviously, you know, it depends on the poet, right? We all come to the table differently. For me, I look at the poems as being documents of a certain period of time.
All right.
The poems that, you know, that are in the collection that first appeared in different journals and such, we've changed those things. You know, I've changed them after they've been out there. Just because they appear in a journal and, you know, 3-4 years later or whatever, it appears in a book, doesn't mean it's going to be the same poem. Doesn't necessarily mean that it should be the same poem. And even when I pull these things out and do them live, you know, I'll change different things in the moment. So it's they inform the experience, but they're not the total experience for me, if that makes sense.
It does.
And I like there's a wonderful artist named Mark Bradford, who's tall and black and brilliant, and he works in a fashion where he'll build up something and then he'll tear it down using like power tools, and then he'll rebuild it and he'll do the same thing. And I got really fascinated in his work a couple of years ago, and I thought, man, like, I think that this is kind of where it's at. Like, everything is malleable. Language itself is malleable, right? So once I kind of had that distinction, I was like, well, I don't want to be tethered to anything. So if I'm trying to edit a poem, you know, I'll gut a whole bunch of it. I'll flip the whole thing upside down. I'll do this. I'll rip this out. I'll put this in. I'm not in love with anything. It's all malleable, all just material for me to utilize. So it's all documents to me. You know, it's all just workable text. The format, the forms that I'm in, they all change. They all change, and they change the poems.
Share another poem.
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, that I would start writing poems for Black characters in horror movies.
Oh, wow.
And it started as a joke. But this was the first one that I got out of it. And so Julius Gaw is a character in the movie Friday the 13th, Part 8, which is known as Jason Takes Manhattan. And he is the only Black character in that film, which is also fascinating because half the movie takes place in New York, but whatever. So this is Elegy for Julius Gaw. Even though I've seen the scene well over 30 times and know how it ends, I still have hope in my cells. This will be the time some miracle will reach through the screen and save him. Though he faced death on the ashen clavicle of that Manhattan building before the lone audience of the moon, he will somehow will his exhausted body into slipping that fatal Sunday punch to escape free, unsmudged and alive. Perhaps it is just the world refusing to let me be, to stay out of my head for the runtime of the film. But I also cannot help thinking about the other Black boys not hired by a casting director to be rendered headless on film. Those now forever anchored to being young, whose families were elected by the god of circumstance to carry the murders of their sons or fathers or brothers the remainder of their days. How many times have I seen the soul of someone Black exit the pores of their tiny mosques of muscle and flesh, vacating this life? Each of their final moments with a horror film I did not pay to see and cannot let go of. In some way, isn't this the nature of being Black in America? Always residing so close to terror, we are wounded but never surprised when it pitches one of us into the limbo of its maw. Me, I want the alternate ending, not just for Julius, but for all the other young Black men buried in my brain, each one tucked into the pink soil of my mind. I want the alternate ending. A burst of lightning blossoms and brings them life again, and they gaze into the Black eyes of their fates and say, "Take your best shot," before punching their hands bloody, staving off the afterlife's hungry invitation. I want the alternate ending where they find their ways back into the graces of their most loved. In the distance, night bleeds away, and a brand new beginning sets upon them. As the credits cascade down the screen, the language left on their breath is the antithesis of horror, then close to horror. Thank you.
Wow. Your writing is so visceral. Does writing energize or exhaust you?
It does both of those things.
Talk to me.
I think that's part of that's part of it. You know, a couple years ago, Rainn Wilson was on Super Soul Sunday with Oprah, and he said that doing your art, whatever your craft is kind of the equivalent prayer, right? You're in communion with something divine beyond yourself. And I think that, like anything that has a spiritual component, you know, it is something that you can find great jubilation in, but also something that can be very taxing because it demands so much of yourself. It's not just a physical act. You're utilizing your mind, you know, your emotional states, who you've been. You know, some of these things require you to enter moments that weren't necessarily the greatest in your life. And how do you process?
Yes.
but it's all a part of the sum, and it's one of those things that I think it's part of the draw. It's something that you can literally feel. Then after you get something that you're proud of, you're like, there it is. This partially made this process worth it, and now I have to go bang my head against the wall and try to do it like some more time. And that's not saying that every poem is like that or like that, but it definitely, it's going to get you at some point in times.
Well, I really enjoy your work, and I want to hear another poem, my friend.
Okay. And thank you so much. Thank you for all of this. So the last poem, I think, will be kind of keeping with the horror theme, right? This is the Candyman Blues. Think of the commitment it takes to call any one name 5 consecutive times. Think of the desire at the heart of making it a mantra. What they call me is a sacred word built on blues and blood, like any black man born and buried in the South. They say Candyman enough times, and I am obliged to appear because they made a god out of me. How could I not come when summoned, when prayed to? How can I not grant them their wish to see my face, mine the last they'll see, mine their guide away from this life? Many call me monster. Who made me into one? What name should we ascribe to those whose brutality transformed me? If I am what they say I am, it is because I did not know my place back then. Because I made love to a white woman, daughter in the kiln of her womb. Before I became a monster on their tongues, I was the monster drinking in their sun. Now, my place is in the dark. The shadows and I keep company until the anxious chant of a curious mouth calls me out. Now, I live in the whispers of my congregation, in the quiet notes of their barely breathed hymns. Thank you.
Wow. Gleaming of the Blade. When did you learn about yourself writing this book, my friend?
I have learned so many things. I continue to learn a lot of different things. And as far as, right before the book got accepted, I was talking to my then fiance, now wife, and I was like,
very nice.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the highlights of the year. But I felt really, really dejected, because I've worked at the collection so long, and one of my biggest fears artistically is that maybe I'm not seeing what it should be or what it needs to be, but I think I am. I always think that maybe I'm a little bit off. Maybe the message isn't quite clear, and so I was having one of those moments, and then obviously, like a less than a week later, the people from Bull City reached out and they're like, hey, we love this thing, and we want to run with it. So I think that's to and I'm gonna have to keep reminding myself of this, but I learned to just kind of trust the work. And the work doesn't have to be for everybody. It's not meant to exist in every space. You just need it to exist in the one space. And hopefully that space will be the one that is the one with the most love and the most support and the most opportunity.
Yes.
So I've definitely learned that, but I also learned that people are really excited about the work, and that just blows me away. I think being writers, we're so accustomed to kind of working in small communities or in rooms alone. So the fact that on the other end of the poems, people are like, hey, this is great. We want to know this. We want to do that. I mean, that's just another layer,
Mm-hmm. Wow. What do you want readers to get from encountering your work?
I I feel like my wants are pretty simple. If people choose to check out the work, I want them to feel something. And I don't necessarily want to dictate what that is, but I like when I'm sitting down and I'm working on a poem, what I am aspiring to do is the same thing that a director, in a movie is doing behind the lens of the camera. I want to put the audience in the driver's seat, and I'm going to show you this world, and I'm going to show you these things that, might break your heart. They might make you angry, whatever. But I want you to have an experience. And I think that that's something that we all shoot for in different ways, but that's definitely something that I don't want anybody to read my poem and just be like, okay. My idea for you to, for it to kind of haunt you a little bit.
Where can listeners find your work?
Sure. If people want to get the book, which if you do, thank you. You can go to Bull City's website. If you Google Bull City Press, it'll pop right up. You also can search for Christian J. Collier, The Gleaming of the Blade. It'll pop up. Or you can go to my personal website, which is christianjcollier.com. And that's kind of like the hub for everything. It'll connect you to my Instagram and other social media. And, if you, do that, just definitely say hi. And I'd love to talk to you.
All right. Would you be willing to share one more before we end this journey? One more.
Absolutely. I can do that. And
you can share as many as you like, to be honest. I don't care. I'm enjoying this, so unless you need to go somewhere, you can share as many as you like.
Well, I'm not going to eat up too much of your time. But can I read one that we had to cut from the manuscript?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay, so you guys are getting exclusive content. So I'm a huge Biggie Smalls fan, and we had to cut it just because of like the rights for Biggie Smalls songs. But this is called America, a Biggie Smalls Cento. I know how it feels. I'm surrounded by criminals there every night. I check the beds and the closet. Everybody dying. Matter of fact, I'm sick of talking. People talk about it. Hail Mary. I stay sing body after body. Wake up armed and dangerous. Before I go to sleep, the dog. Mom's crouched over the casket screaming. Hold your breath. I hear you. Sometimes your words taste like death, full of grace, with chalk around it. I know how it feels to wake up. I'm surrounded by criminals, armed and dangerous, there every night before I go to sleep. I check the beds and the closet, the kids, the dog, everybody dying. Mom's crouched over the casket, screaming. Matter of fact, hold your breath. I'm sick of talking. I hear you talk about it. Sometimes your words taste like death. Hail Mary, full of grace. I stay sing body after body with chalk around it.
Ooh.
Thank you.
Listening to you share, what is your definition of black masculinity?
How much time you got?
I didn't want to throw a heavy one at you in the last 5 minutes. But it's about black masculinity.
Yeah, I've been raised by so many, people who've illustrated different components of it, from obviously like
yes.
my father and people in my family, but also the people, who I've modeled myself after, like creatively. And even like beyond that, like Dr. Michael Eric Dyson and Gregory Tate. I think one of the most important things about black masculinity is acknowledging that it's okay to have like the human experiences.
Yes.
And that's okay. And I think that that's one thing that I've definitely had to work on over like the past year is that I hate showing emotion publicly. Like I hate crying when I'm like touched or sad or anything like that. I hate doing it. And
yes,
my ability as a black man, born and bred in the South, but not, this doesn't just apply to black men in the South. My ability to make it from one day and into the next means that I have to be in control of my emotions at all times. But beyond that, I have to be in control of how people interpret my emotions at all times. And I just don't really necessarily want to participate in that as much anymore. Like I want to be human, and I think that that's okay. And so that's one of the biggest things that I've learned about black masculine is just like we have to give ourselves more and more permissions to have the sum of human experience. Because if not, I think that it just ends, it ends up adding more stress and problems down the line that end up affecting all of us, black women, black communities, all of it. And I'm interested in what the world is, and the world for black people is when, if we just give ourselves that allowance and that freedom, that's an element of freedom.
So you would say, if I ask this, and then we're going to close, the role of a poet in modern-day society is to do what? And we've talked about it already, but just give it to me one more time. The role of a poet in modern-day society.
I think the role of a poet in everyday society is just to write, I think all the other stuff is in there. I don't think that there's any way that you can write and not allow the world in, and the world that you encounter in some capacity. I don't think that every poem doesn't need to be a political poem, but the political will definitely show up in a poem if the poet is actually, just doing their job as far as like writing and reading and existing in the world with observation. So that's my big thing is just, I think that our obligation is to read, to write, but also, to just allow ourselves to be a part of that process and to pay attention.
Christian J. Collier, what's next in the works for you, my friend? What's next?
Oh, man. Well, the book officially comes out in February. Pre-orders are being taken right now. So I'm just really kind of gearing up for that launch. And I'm excited for people to get into the work. And, this is my first real baby out there in the world. So I'm just excited about what the reaction will be.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me today. I've learned a lot. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being real. The Gleaming of the Blade, everybody. A book to buy. Well, I want to thank you, man, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
All right. All right, everybody. As I share with all of you every week, let poetry ring throughout the land. Take care and be safe. Until next time, I'm Michael Anthony Ingram. All right.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.